up here. Sam Flood from NBC. Over 30 Emmys, right? I'm not sure exactly where the count is now, but you've done everything from Sunday Night Football, NASCAR, obviously, racing, hockey, Olympics, any sport. I feel like you've touched at some point over your long and illustrious career, and you've come up with a lot of technological advancements, a lot of production advancements to keep attention and keep these games interesting and exciting. And Alvin, Second Spectrum you guys have won an Emmy for Romo Vision, so you're getting there. I don't know if the over-under is at 30 yet, but I believe it. Here's proof that you work hard for a long time in this industry. You can get there. So thank you both so much for being here. I want to start not with you guys, but with the people on the other side of the screen, the fans at home. And today I'm curious, Sam, if you don't mind going first here. What's the hardest thing about getting people's attention today? What about today's media environment presents the biggest challenge to you as you're going into each broadcast and each sport and thinking about maintaining their engagement?
The biggest issue is the number of options people have.
Yeah.
The optionality is through the roof, and our job is to figure out how to tell a story that creates a memorable moment for people and engage the audience in new ways. You can't rinse and repeat in this business anymore. Mm-hmm. Every race, every year, every week, you've got to reinvent, reevaluate, and be highly self-critical of what we've been doing and what we need to do to try and engage the audience differently.
And for you, I kid, you've been in this industry a long time too. I'm having some fun up here. But for you, how much have you seen it change in terms of the pressure to capture them right away, to keep them? I mean, how much are you thinking about that competition during a live event or in the planning stages as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the ways that we think we can attack it is by leveraging technology, leveraging innovation to differentiate some of the options you have. And I think one of the core things that we think we can do is target audiences uniquely. With digital platforms, you're no longer sort of beholden to having a single option for a viewer. So with digital platforms, if you're able to sort of target folks, that gives you more opportunities to try to get people in the door, to make them feel targeted uniquely, and to hopefully capture their attention and give them a reason to create what used to be appointment viewing. And I think that's the gold standard, right? Is to have an event on the calendar that you clear your calendar for. Mm-hmm. And the more options and the more swings that you can take, then I think more opportunities you have to do that and to create that.
And that's differentiating from everything else, but also from other sports content, right? Like I can any night of the week turn on 8 different games. It's like, which of these is going to appeal to me most? Which sport is going to appeal to me most? How are you evaluating what those things are that do grab people? Is that trial and error? Is that looking for inspiration in other sports? Where do you go to find these new ideas that are going to capture a new fan or keep a fan there longer?
I think for us, at least, because we work very closely with our partners, with the broadcasters who are really at the front lines of trying to innovate for fans and trying to bring these new experiences. So a lot of it is sort of being receptive to the ideas that the broadcasters are bringing to us. But at the same time, I think we look at things like social media and the things that we can put out there and to incorporate how you might innovate your broadcast.
And I'd say NASCAR has been the very forefront of innovation.
Yeah.
Just because you're in cars, you have space to put early onboard cameras were in cars. The telemetry and data that we got back in the 2001 to 2006 contract we have with NASCAR, with pointers and all the data coming out of the car that really drove engagement to a different level. And each year we evolve with new toys and new abilities to play things because of the car. Yeah. And now you're putting data devices on the drivers and getting data out of the drivers and the heart rate going up and down. And we saw a couple of years ago, some drivers would go through the biggest mess you'll ever see on a racetrack, right, flatline, yeah, and others, it spiked to 200 beats a minute. And it's just the change in how humans react based on what they're like. And that data was very different than we've ever played with before, because not everyone is willing to put a device on their body.
Do you see, how much more of a potential do you see for biometric data in sports broadcasts?
I think it's got incredible value. It's a question of where you cross that line.
Yeah.
And in a sport that has the danger involved in NASCAR, there are lines that you have to be very careful about. And we always strive to be respectful of the athlete. And when bad situations happen on a racetrack, we have a number of policies in place to protect the integrity of the situation and protect the driver from the wrong images getting out.
I would just piggy there and just say, one of the themes that I think from earlier that we heard on the Netflix, like there's a couple ways in which you can grab the attention of the fan. One is like long form content that allows a level of depth and access that you wouldn't otherwise get, and that's what the earlier panel covered. And I think what Sam just said, depth of data, and providing layers that you didn't otherwise have access to. And the more and more we get information that can color the story in front of us to allow opportunities to explain why, to have more color and just depth about what's going on, I think those are the ways that are innovating the way sports are presented today. And there's just more depth that is available about a given sport, about a given athlete that maybe we didn't have otherwise 10, 20 years ago.
And the word why you just said is the most important word in broadcasting. When we first did NASCAR back in 2001, I wrote up a big sign, why, and put it up in the booth in front of Benny Parsons, Wally Dallenbach.
Amazing.
And that was the word I wanted them to answer, why things were happening on the track. And we evolved with it. Now Steve Letarte, a couple of years ago, came out with these amazing animations that break down why the cars are doing things on the track, how it works, how a car breaks down, why there were fires in certain part of the cars, all this in these amazing animations that gave you insights that you never were able to get before. And that's the evolution, but it all comes from one question, why?
And then even to the biometric point of, why is he acting this way or that way? He's nervous, his heart rate is X or Y. It's fascinating that is the question. And because for a long time, originally the announcer's job was what, right? It was like, who is that? Who's in the lead? What's the score? But now that data all exists either on the screen or very quickly off the screen, people who want to find it. So how have you worked with the announcers to kind of understand their changing role? How have they kind of embraced some of the different things they can do because some of that data is now available? They don't have to kind of continually update it.
Yeah, so for us, a lot of the early things that we did were independent of the announcers. We just sort of were informed by their habits and tried to accentuate the things that they were already trying to do. Most recently, with some of the things that we've done with Premier League Productions and Data Zone, where they're staffing unique announcers to speak to the kinds of visualizations that they do. One of the early things that we found, like for soccer, just identifying the players with what we call augmentations, but visual assets, took an immediate load off of the announcers to have to just tell you what's happening. Who's the center back, who's the right back, who's the left back. And you kind of remove that. And what that does, I think, is if you know that you have visual accompaniment that explains an immediate like what and why, it allows for more storytelling to happen. You're spending less time trying to just document what's happening. While still important, it's very important to document the game. I don't want to take away from that. But if you weren't beholden to sort of explaining everything in real time and you felt you had the bandwidth to tell more stories, that is an opportunity in the main broadcast. And that is more opportunity to provide depth that you may have not felt you had the time to do otherwise.
And you want to look at how you present in different ways on a regular basis. Before this season, we looked at how we open our shows and how traditionally in television, you do the tease and the animation and the scene set and you come to an opening on camera.
Yeah.
We stopped doing opening on cameras in NASCAR. We sent Jeff Burton and Dale Jr. down to the track, and it's called their Excellent Adventure. And they start every show with an adventure, whether they're at the start-finish line or in the flag stand or walking past the three cars that were kind of angry at each other the week before, and they're lined up back to back to back on the grid, and who knows if someone might put a little bumper into someone else. So you're engaging in a different way, and traditional television says do the opening on camera. And that idea came because we were starting our Big Ten productions this year, and we decided to get rid of the opening on camera because there's so much energy in a college stadium when the teams take the field that we didn't want to leave that to put our announcers on camera. So we moved the on camera in college football to the first break at the end of the first quarter. And rather than speculating about what might happen in that first quarter, we were able to react to the first quarter and evolve the story differently. And I think each sport, you're able to take a concept or an asset from to grow. So we took something from the Big Ten to NASCAR. When we started the NHL back in 2006, we took pit reporters from NASCAR where you get real-time data in the sport. What other sport are people stepping up and talking to the people engaged in the battle on the pit box, talking to crew chiefs? So we came up with the idea of putting a ex-player, ex-coach between the benches. We called it Inside the Glass, which enabled real-time data. Rather than two announcers that are 5 stories above the ice surface, they were between the two benches getting real-time information. As players came off the ice, you could see they were happy, they were sad, they're ready to kill somebody, whatever it might be. we had that data in real time. We weren't speculating. We were hearing those exchanges. So again, each sport can learn from the other. You just have to stop thinking, oh, it's a hockey game, it's a NASCAR race. They all are interrelated because you're trying to tell a story and tell you why things are happening.
And how does moving where the announcers are or which announcer you're starting with, how does that change the way you're selling the game to fans, saying, what is your reason for watching that? Like, how has that evolved over time in terms of what the pitch is to someone who's maybe watching whatever the previous thing is and trying to hook them and moving it into the field of play like that?
Well, it's active, and action matters, and it's engaging. And their job is to engage the audience. We've got to create moments, and moments happen organically on a racetrack. They happen in sports organically.
Yeah.
But we can enhance that moment. Our job is to make big events bigger and make moments more memorable. And if we do that right, we're going to create an audience that's going to stick with us longer. And ultimately, the goal is to get as many eyeballs watching. And your success is oftentimes determined by how many people tune in, because then we can make more money for Xfinity and all the sponsors that have paid us to tout their product.
Exactly. And from the second spectrum perspective, it's a similar question. How much have you guys felt the need to explain what these stats are, where they come from, what the point is? You have to do that a little bit every time because there's somebody who's the first time they're encountering them. But for the most part, people are getting increasingly familiar with them. How are you figuring out how much of that explanation to do each time, and how has that evolved over time?
I think because we tend to work in a space where we're operating on the, I don't want to say fringes, but we are mostly focused on alternative broadcasts. And to that end, that tends to attract a certain fan that might already have a level of interest in the sport, but is looking for maybe something deeper. And so in part, because we've often operated without the direct partnership of an unannounced team to where you have a cohesive production, at times, sometimes you just let it rip. Honestly, I like to use a baseball example. Once upon a time, exit velocity was not a very popular statistic, but over time, they just kind of kept seasoning broadcasts with it. And now if something's over 100 miles an hour, it's probably a hit or it's like a very good defensive play that stopped an out. And so you can create shorthand. Broadcasters can do that if they're willing to sort of keep presenting it. Like on-base percentage and OPS are now commonplace in every baseball broadcast, but that wasn't the case 10 years ago. And so I think there's a number of data points that we can continue to present. I think it's a combination and it's a collaboration between us and the broadcasters that we work with to try to create shorthand and commitment to these resources to these metrics so that the fan can become more familiar. But I think we should give fans more credit because we are working with an audience that's a lot more familiar with data, a lot more familiar with what's out there. They have more access to these things and they can inform themselves. So I think you can take certain chances and use repetition as a means to create that shorthand.
Yeah. How have you thought about data? In NASCAR specifically, I think is a great case study for this because when I step into a trailer or when I spend time on the track, the way they're watching the race is a million different numbers, right? They're looking at brakes, they're looking at tires, they're looking at in and out of turns. The viewer at home sees 1% of 1% of that, right? They're just seeing, he passed him, I'm not really sure why, or it seems like he's doing well on this run or whatever. How are you thinking about how much more numbers you can put into that, or maybe giving the numbers to announcers to figure out when to squeeze them in? What's the balance there?
The balance is you don't want to speak in code. You don't want to. You want to be inclusive. You want to welcome people in. You don't want to feel like it's a closed society that you're not welcomed in.
Yeah.
I think that's the risk. But that's why you hire Steve Letarte. You have an incredible communicator who was a world-class crew chief who understands the data and can translate it for the non-data geeks.
Yeah.
And his ability to do that is second to none. And so we're fortunate in our shop to have a Steve Letarte that can take those numbers and make them simple, just like taking these animations that break down these cars on what works and what doesn't work. I think that's the key is how you frame it. And a lot of that is the person speaking to you about the numbers, because otherwise it's just numbers.
Yeah. Have you thought about having a numbers person in the booth for any of your broadcasts? We've seen some local NBA teams, on their local network have an analyst insider, and we've seen obviously officiating experts are now commonplace. We've got kicking experts. Do you think there's a place for an analyst expert in the booth?
We have Steve Kornacki, who does Football Night in America, and so we get after Thanksgiving, and each week he breaks down the playoff probabilities, why it'll happen. He's at the Breeders' Cup today and tomorrow out at Santa Anita, breaking down trends and odds and what is going to happen on the racetrack potentially. So in his day job, he's worrying about who's going to be the next president and why the polling is right or wrong. And obviously, we learned a lot about polling data in 2016,
Sure.
how wrong it can be. So now it's a whole new generation of data in politics. And Steve is the forefront of that. And we're fortunate to have him as part of the team.
Yeah, that's a perfect example. I'm curious how much you look at video games for inspiration. We can start with you, because I do think when a lot of people turn it on, they're like, is this real? Is this a video game? Because starting with the names under the players and moving to some of the stats that you're showing, what is that process and that evolution that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So it would be silly of us not to use in the sort of presentation of these products that we put out there. It would be silly not to reference video games. It's a very successful model. I think the biggest compliment you could give our group is that if it looks like a video game, then we're doing our job right.
Which is amazing, because for a long time you looked at a video game and said if it looked like the real game, they're doing their job right?
Exactly.
Totally, yeah.
So it's kind of on the other foot a little bit.
Yeah.
And so absolutely we use video games and the way in which they present things. I think it's in the conversations we've had with our broadcast partners, they've talked about using different cameras to mimic that, and then leveraging our technology to be able to add that additional layer in real time and to have a unique stream. So it's definitely front of mind for everyone.
Yeah.
You see it now as skeletal tracking data comes to the fore with optical tracking, doing recreations and leveraging models. I think it paves the way for potential partnerships with the EAs of the world and so on. So I think we're getting pretty close to a point where you can recreate a game, you can make a game and make it very video game-like because of some of the innovations in tracking data and motion capture. So absolutely we use video games as reference.
Yeah, and the Premier League, I don't know if that's what you were going to point to, but you guys did a broadcast where the camera was specifically designed to look like it does in what is now EAFC.
Yes, and we also, the Chicago Street Course race, our director, Sean Owens, did his camera plan based on the video of
Exactly.
the track.
Yeah.
And he picked where cameras were, and at one point, because of weather, we lost our hard cameras and had to use all robotics, and each robotic camera could cover the track. Back when we got NASCAR starting for the 2001 to 2006 contract, in 2000, I learned NASCAR by driving, and I had my office set up with a steering wheel and the pedal, and I would play the EA game.
How
the
good were
track
you?
before we went to. My name on the track was Buckshot Flood, because Buckshot Jones was driver back then. I run real good. I'd like to thank the boys back in the shop. So I had it all going on as Buckshot Flood, and I've given up that persona now, but I can go third person whenever you need it.
No, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And right now, what are you looking at in the world of video games, in the world of social media? Where are you looking for inspiration for that next, whether it's just how graphics look or where you're putting cameras? Where are you looking for inspiration to continue pushing these things forward?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of game engine stuff that's happening with Unreal, and you kind of keep an eye on that. You look at no further than, like, for me, the recent Toy Story broadcast that ESPN did, which is, a combination of Unreal Engine, and I believe they use pose data from Hawkeye as well. So you're looking to what competitors are doing. You're looking at the latest video games, and you're always canvassing. You're always, and you find inspiration in different places, right? And so I think oftentimes, as long as you're just consuming content, and whether it's watching live sports and some of the camera angles that they use, I think all of that serves to inform the kinds of innovations and the kinds of different things you can think about. All of it is opportunity for trying something new, as long as there's inspiration there.
Yeah, exactly. You've got to look at everything that's out there and be informed. And if you close off any new opportunity, you're hurting the viewer. And so our job is to look at everything. And thankfully, we have a team that is always looking for the next idea.
How have the conversations with governing bodies and sports and leagues evolved in terms of what their priorities are, what they're willing to do? Are they getting more experimental? Are they getting more conservative over time? How has that evolved?
You look at the NFL, there was no Skycam until the XFL. Then the NFL allowed Skycam. Now the NFL has Steadicams running on the field when a touchdown happens, and sometimes when a touchdown hasn't happened, they run on the field, which can be a problem. I mean, NASCAR has always been at the forefront of that, allowing cameras in cars, allowing data out of the cars, and all the tricks of the trade that they've come up with to be collaborative and to make the product better, because it's very different to be at a racetrack, because all the senses are touched at a racetrack. And our job is to try and get that home. And so you need to try different things. You need to put cameras in weird places. and you need to be aggressive where you put the cameras in the cars, and sometimes the teams are a little bit sensitive to that, and sometimes you need a bully in the NASCAR front office to say, no, they want a camera there, they're getting a camera there. Yeah. And so we usually collaborate very well on accomplishing our goals.
Talking about cameras, there's been, I think drones are kind of the new thing. They've been kind of the quote-unquote new thing for a while. What excites you about where cameras can go, the size, the mobility? What kind of shots are you thinking about that maybe are possible now that weren't possible 3 years ago?
I think in every sport, there's a way to play with it. For a while, it was just the drone's going to give you the beauty shot.
Yeah.
Now, how do you put it in the event coverage? In golf, can you fly it at the ball and then follow the ball down the fairway? Can you spin differently with it rather than just coming up and revealing the island green at TPC? So I think it's the creativity of the directors to look at new ways to do it, and we're constantly suggesting what we'd like to see. And even at a racetrack, where can you fly that drone? And that's always a risk, whether you can go over the fans, over the track. What if it comes down on top of a car? All the things that might happen. I think it's safer to fall in a car than a center fielder, because I do think the roofs are pretty strong in these cars.
Yeah.
I think in parallel with that, though, as those conversations about camera placements and the actual just the logistics of it all, like being able to place a camera to get the shot, what you will get eventually is with the sort of evolution of 3D and being able to recreate environments for production worlds, I think you'll be able to recreate the angles that you might not logistically be able to get to, and have it informed by the 3D data that you're extracting from a given event. So I think those two will probably work in harmony over time. Which one outpaces the other, unclear, but I think those are the paths by which you can start to create shots that you haven't really seen before.
Right. You can see a play develop from the vision of inside a goalie's mask, not by putting a camera there, but by having the data there. Or you can even see.
We've put a camera there.
Right. Or you can put a camera there. Right. Right.
And then the goalies got, by the playoffs, didn't want to wear them because they were 2 ounces heavier. So all of a sudden, this great shot we had the whole regular season in 2006 goes away. There's no anger, there's no disappointment, there's no frustration.
And the umps have been another one. Officials, whatever, referees. Increasingly, you guys are trying to convince them to put a camera on, or trying to get them to open up. The NBA is kind of getting more of their audio.
Yeah, well, Fox did a great job at the World Series with UmpCam. That lets you really see how fast that ball is coming in, the movement on a slider. I think it's a remarkable shot, and I think Fox did a great job executing it.
Transitioning a little bit, I'm curious, these alternate casts, as we started here, but how much does that open up the toy box? How much does that allow you to experiment, both on the main feed and then on these alternate broadcasts?
I think I would hope that it's a very attractive playground for various broadcasters to road test a lot of things. And I think one of the clearest examples, or at least one of the more recent examples, was last night during Thursday Night Football.
Yeah.
TNF Prime Vision, that's the alternate stream that's available. It does it repurposes an all 22 that was largely used for replay angles, and with added augmentation, it kind of innovates a new experience that can target, hardcore fans who want to see the two high safeties or the single safety looks, right? But what happened is that, that alt broadcast had utilized something called defensive alert, which is leveraging AI models and so on and so forth. And that made its way into the main broadcast yesterday for the first time. And so I think what it allows the people on the main broadcast is to see something that's being road tested in a live production.
And then everyone's all of a sudden tweeting about it and whatever.
Everyone's talking about it. It works as a trial balloon. You can see how people are reacting to it. It's not impacting your main broadcast. And you can kind of see it. And it's like, hey, that's doing well over there. Let's bring it over here and let's incorporate it. And now you're innovating on the fly, and you're not having the big technical ramp up until your big event to then deploy something that you've tested in the background, but you haven't had a chance to really road test it in front of people. And I think that's what alternate broadcast can really prove, is that there is a place in front of fans that you can sort of try things out, and it's okay, and you're not going to take away from the main fans, and it can make people happy. You don't have to stick with it. You can be agile. There's a lot of value to that, and I think that's one of the main draws for alternate broadcast. I think from a broadcaster perspective, I would think is just that ability to try things and see it, because a lot of times it's not really tangible. It's just a concept. It's an idea by the tech group, and then you can kind of like sink your teeth into it and have something tangible that you can look at and integrate.
You think of the toys you try in golf, they would put in the putting line. And, well, the putting line depends on how hard you putt it. If you're going to tap it, the ball's going to break a little bit more. If you're going to do a firm putt in the middle of the cup, the line's very different. And so I think you've got to make sure that everything you create is based in reality. And sometimes we go down paths that aren't correct. But we always try things, and I do believe that you should test offline to bring online.
Yeah.
And when you bring them in, it does enhance. You do have the get off my lawn people, and you got to be careful because you can't alienate the audience. And NASCAR is an older audience base, and our job is to welcome in new audience and grow the audience. So I think, it's that balance that is always being sought by the broadcasters to bring these two worlds together so you don't alienate that core fan.
Well, it always gives me hives just thinking about the fact that for you all, oftentimes it is the Super Bowl or the final race of the weekend where you're going to bring out the new graphics, the new cameras. It's like, and I get that you have more resources for those big events, but this kind of gives you an opportunity to maybe try out some things, but are there still some things that you want to hold back and say, look, we want to unveil this at our biggest race or our biggest event of the year?
The question is always before the start of every season or the start of a big event, what new toys do you have? What do you have?
Yeah.
And to me, it's we need to do the job we've done all year.
Uh-huh.
And what we want to add is a better experience for the viewer. What we don't want to do is do something that's jarring. But every Super Bowl at NBC, we always roll out our new graphic look,
Right.
and that graphic look will take us to the next Super Bowl. But we test the hell out of it and make sure it all works, and it's great. And it, 99% of the time, people love it, and on you go. That 1%, and that's why you have a PR staff that has to deal with it. And you sometimes like them to have to put out fires, because otherwise they sit around doing press releases, and that's not as exciting for them as getting fires.
Yeah, I'm sure they love that. It's good motivation. Along those lines of all casts, I want to ask about these family-friendly broadcasts that have emerged. We've seen a lot of success in the NFL with that. We've seen the NHL and some other leagues trying that. From your perspective, I'm curious for you, is that something you saw for a long time? Like, oh, this really high-end data tracking tech is going to let us put slime on the field and turn this character into a cartoon? Like, how surprising to you is that is maybe, one of the biggest implementations of this really high-tech atmosphere that we're in right now?
Slime was definitely not first on my list.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably more data nerdy than that, but I'm glad it's found a home. But I think ultimately what data does, and sort of having a platform where you can try a bunch of different things, is what I believe is that augmentation, or just being able to leverage data to inform, it can lower the barrier of entry of fans. So if you're never watching a sporting event, or you're watching a sporting event for the very first time, you may not know who the characters are. Like, it's a story, you don't know who's who.
Yeah.
Identification can help that. You don't have to ask your buddy, hey, who's that? Who's number 23 there? I don't know. I'll just tell you, and you can lower that barrier of entry. And that's where the fan journey can begin. It's just like, hey, walk me through what is happening on the screen in a very basic way. And as I graduate my fandom, maybe I'll be more of a casual, and the main broadcast will appeal to me. And then at the other end of that, maybe I'll have the opportunity to strip away all of those production assets, because I can inform the broadcast my own self. I have the hubris to do that, and I will know what's going on. I don't need announcers. I just need sound, and I will paint the pictures with my eyes and words. That's the fan journey that's possible in this platform with digital, and augmentation can help along that journey to grow a fan from never knowing the sport to a hardcore who doesn't need any of the effects. And I think that's what I believe the augmentation is capable of. And so I think that's one of the ways I think we can grow the fan using that kind of technology with data. And I think that's what data enables. I think that's what the digital landscape enables, is that opportunity to take the fan on that complete journey.
I think you've got an audience often that looks back to the good old days, how great it used to be. And our first time in NASCAR back in 2001, people weren't loving how we were cutting the race. Well, it was the same director who's doing it the year before on ESPN, the same camera positions with actually more cameras. So what we ultimately did is took some people in the room and showed them a race from the year before on ESPN, and then showed them what we were doing. And they said, we like this one much better, the new stuff. I said, okay, you just got to step back and realize things are changing, but in your mind, you perceive it a certain way. That was the glory days. Well, back in the 90s, NASCAR races were won by, there might be 4 cars in the lead lap, and it's very different today. But people romanticize the past.
Yeah.
And with technology and new toys, you're able to make it more relevant today. But you also have the harsh critics who don't really understand what they actually saw in the past. It's that flawed memory.
How much are you thinking about looking at NBC's larger IP, the entertainment stuff, and opportunities to bring in some of those crossover audiences, or especially as we talk about Peacock and alternate broadcasts? Like, is that an exciting opportunity to you?
Yeah, we're constantly looking. We partner with Bravo for a lot of things. Kentucky Derby, we do a lot there. I mean, Dale Jr., we moved him in different areas to try and expose him. We used him our last 2 Super Bowls. Dale had a prominent role in both ones in the pregame because we wanted the fans to say, hey, this guy's pretty cool. I want to hang out with him and bring him to the racetrack that way. We have him do the Kentucky Derby, and Dale has his excellent venture at the Kentucky Derby. Again, that's one of the Olympics and the Derby are the 2 sporting events that have a larger female audience than male audience. And so Junior did the Olympics. Junior did the Derby. There's a reason for that.
Along those lines, what is the kind of the information density cap that you set for yourself? And like one of the things you guys do a great job at NASCAR is showing me 2 different spots on the track at once, whether it's multi-camera, whatever you want to call that, multi-box. And we've seen obviously this multi-game model come, whether it's red zone or this is an NHL version as well now. For you, how are you thinking about overload? Like, is that just like you just it when you see it, or you continue to push and push and push until you get a revolt? How are you thinking about how much action can I put on this screen because I need to keep people glued here without totally sending them away?
You have to be in the same genre. I mean, I'll go back all the way to 1988, the Olympics in Seoul, Korea. There was Greg Louganis on the springboard, and we double boxed that. I was an Olympic researcher back then, but they double boxed Louganis on the springboard, 3-meter springboard diving with the U.S. basketball team playing a game. And it was complete chaos. The 2 things don't match. Louganis hits his head on the diving board, and it was one of the dramatic moments of the Olympic Games. Yet you got a basketball game going here, which announcers you're going to listen to, and it was highly criticized. At a racetrack, we don't go to doubles or triples until a ways into the race, and there's a reason for it because people are acknowledging and understanding the storyline we're trying to cover. So at the end of the race, we've had triple boxes last week in Martinsville to tell you what's going to happen in these 3 critical parts of who's transferring into the championship 4.
I mean, that's an example from the past. Is there room for more? Can you go to 4? Or you feel like 3 is as much as people can take?
I think you've got to be careful. I mean, pit stops, it used to be 3 pit stops you cover, then we went to 4, then back to 3. We're all ADD now.
Right.
How much more ADD can we make people? And that's kind of the challenge. I mean, you're working hard at it, so keep rolling.
Oh yeah, that's my bread and butter. I'm just trying to inundate people with data as much as I can. Like, I don't know about you all, but when an Octobox comes on for Red Zone, that's Scott Hansen, my favorite time. So like, there's so much going on, and that 2 box you just described, that's like a feature in ESPN app. Like, just having multiple screens up at one time. So I mean, I think the younger, like, I'm an old millennial, so even I get sort of tired at times, but this generation after me, they can handle a ton of data and a ton of information on the screen at once. And I just think that if you think it's too much for that group, for that generation that's coming, it's probably not. And they can probably handle more than you think. But I mean, admittedly, I struggle at times, but this next generation that's coming up, I think they can handle a ton of data.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I usually have the mega cast of 4 things, and often it's 3 cameras in one of the boxes, and then I've got 3 other boxes, and it's kind of endless down the line there. For you, like, is there thinking about it's really important to get the younger fan in now? Like, how do you balance those 2? Because like you said, like, the media diets are so different now. What a 14-year-old is expecting to see when they turn on TV compared to what a 74-year-old is expecting to see when they turn on TV is very different. But you're trying to grab both of them. How hard is that?
Well, you have to, because you have to grow the audience.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your audience is facing death, right? Because it's going to die out. So unless you bring in a new audience, at some point, they're going to be gone.
Yeah.
And they're not being gone to a place any of us want to go anytime soon. So we're constantly trying to figure out how to engage. I mean, for this sport, for NASCAR, I think the most important thing is get people to the racetrack. Because if you come to the racetrack, you're going to get a different appreciation for the sport, and then you're going to watch it on TV. So, we talk a lot about getting the stands full at the tracks again. And the more people in the stands mean the more people are going to watch on TV. I mean, if you put the Lakers and Celtics back in the 80s in a basketball game in an empty stadium, would you want to watch that? Or would you want to watch the game between the Knicks and the Bulls in a full stadium?
Well, that was put to the test a couple years ago, right?
Right?
Yeah.
So we need full stadiums. It makes a difference. We need full racetracks. And this weekend is spectacular. They've got sold out Sunday. We were desperate to get extra seats for stage 1 of the Xfinity race tomorrow, but I think we got the seats all set for the most important event of the weekend, which is stage 1 of the Xfinity race. Others can tell you about that later.
And does that factor into how you're thinking about producing a broadcast? Are you thinking about highlighting how fun it is in the stands and look at these sausages that they're making in the concessions? And
You have to, because it's not a race. This is an event. You are not coming to a race. You're coming to an event. And the minute you call it a race, you're taking away from what it truly is. The racetrack is the ultimate event this weekend. We got 2 events on NBC this weekend. We got the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita, and we got the event here. And it's much more than a horse race out in Santa Anita.
Right.
And this is much more than a car race here.
Is that do you enjoy those events where you come and you're like, okay, we got to know all the drivers and all that, but we also have to budget in time and resources to cover all this other stuff as well?
Yeah, you're looking constantly at how you can engage and make people say, damn, I got to be there next year.
Yeah.
I mean, you look out here, there are 10,000 camping spots taken and all these amazing campers and tents, et cetera. We want people to say, I want to be there next year. We'll take a cut of the action if we get some more people in the camping zone. I'm sure that's okay with NASCAR.
Of course. No, it's done. It's done deal. And from your perspective, what are you hoping someone watches a broadcast that's got this augmented data in it? What are you hoping their first takeaway is or their last takeaway is when the event ends?
I mean, in a perfect world, they watch it for the first time and they feel seen, right? You're leveraging an augmentation, or you're putting together a set of things that targets a fan so that they feel like this is what they have always wanted.
Yeah.
That's the holy grail, right? When they come and watch an alternate broadcast, they feel they don't have to make any trade-offs for the things that maybe they didn't get in the main broadcast. Like I think we talked about this yesterday offline, but like one of my pet peeves as a young fan in the NBA was, as you got to the end, you felt as the audience grew larger, you had to bring them along sooner. But as a hardcore fan who had been there from the beginning of the season to the end, I didn't need to know that Paul Pierce grew up in Inglewood and grew up hating the Celtics. Like, I didn't need to know that in 2008. I knew it because I knew it in October of that season. But I understand that that's the main broadcast challenge. They have a flood of new people coming in and seeing it for the first time. You have to serve them as well. But I didn't feel served in that moment. So I think augmentation or alternate broadcasts allow that opportunity to serve them and serve your hardcore fans and super serve them. I think it's a term you've used before. You can really super serve fans in a way that they've never been served before. The main broadcast gives me 80, 90% of what I want. What if I want 100? That's out there. That opportunity exists, and you can do that on the fringes while not, being inclusive of all of the new fans, while not having to sacrifice being inclusive of all the new fans, all of the new Taylor Swift fans who are coming over, who didn't know Jason Kelce from Travis Kelce, and now they're breaking down, too high shells on the NFL, and why isn't Kelce getting it, Mahomes, get through your progression so you can get it to Kelce. They do an amazing job bringing those fans over, and so that's magic there, and that's one way you grow your audience. I think you also can grow your audience by super serving your hardcore fans who are going to go evangelize the game. They're going to go tell their friends. They're going to go tell their family members. They're going to raise their kids to be fans. So I think there's a multi-faceted path that you can pursue to grow your audience, like capturing the main, super serving your hardcores, providing depth with long-form content and data. These are the ways in which you think you can grow your audience. I think that's the path forward.
Yeah. And all eyes were on Sunday night when Taylor Swift showed up in New York, and I think that is a perfect example of what we're talking a lot about, of like covering the game, covering the event, bringing new people in while serving the people that are sick of hearing about this storyline. What did you guys learn from that experience, and just as you've seen other people cover it, and how to balance all of those various aspects when millions of people are tuning into this one broadcast, hoping to get exactly what they want?
We had the perfect weekend for Taylor Swift. It was in New York. It was the right timing. It had kind of been teased the week before. This was real. We were able to lean into it. Our promotions group did the New York promo a bit perfectly. And then Rob Hyland and the team had Carson Daly come on the air and tell the Swifties what football is all about. So you leaned into it, but you did it the right way. And we were very fortunate. It became a good football game. Stunningly, the Jets hung in there. And so we were able to cover a football game, because if that had been a blowout, which it was trending towards until it got really good, we might have overdone the Taylor Swift stuff, but we didn't because a game broke out. And that was the beauty of sport. You just never know what's going to happen. And without Taylor, I'm not sure it would have been as big a rating, but we had a kick-ass number, and we were thrilled. And I was really proud of Rob and Drew and the team and how they covered the story and made sure we honored the core fan and didn't drive them away from the set. I mean, there were some get off my lawn folks, but there always are going to be.
Uh-huh. How many were there compared to your expectation? Were there more or less?
I think there were less get off my lawn, but you'd have to ask Chris McCloskey, who's got to tell the people that tell you to get off the lawn to go to wherever he wants them to go.
Exactly. Yeah. Got a couple questions to wrap up. One of the things that whenever I'm telling people that, I cover this every once in a while, is they're always asking, when am I going to get to choose my camera angle? When am I going to get to choose my stats? And my reaction is, I don't think you really want to do that. Do you really want to, cut the latest Mission Impossible movie? Like, they know what they're doing. But I'm curious how much you hear that and whether that will ever come to pass under your watch.
No one wants to do that. What someone wants to do is come into our control room for Sunday night or the race on Sunday here and see what happens and see how many choices there are. We're always going to give you the best possible experience because we got the best people who are trained to do this. You're going to get so sick of trying to figure out where to go next that you're going to turn it all off.
I would challenge an average fan to sit in a TD chair to try to cut a broadcast, because that's effectively what it is. You have all of the sort of cameras at your disposal. How do you make a decision? It's hard, and ultimately at the end of the day, it's entertainment, and you probably want it curated for you. You want somebody to take you along and help contextualize it. And I think there's this big push around interactivity, and I want all the things, but like when you watch something on your phone, you probably set it and you don't touch it much. And maybe you would tweak one or two things, but is the lift to give you all those bells and whistles at your disposal really worth it? Or would you just be happy with what is curated for you and with just some different optionality? So I think interactivity is a big buzzword right now, just because everything is on a mobile phone, you have it all at your fingertips. But at the same time, I think, broadcasters do a fantastic job crafting and telling stories for the fan. And I think some optionality is good. I like alternate streams too, but I think the main broadcast does a great job as well. So, interactivity is, I think it's going to be an interesting thing over the next few years about how much it sort of enters, how much capability you give a user to really choose their own adventure.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well, I think that's my cue outside I'm hearing. But one final question I want to ask you guys, just spin forward one last time here. 2024, what are you most excited to see? What's going to be the biggest next step that sports broadcasts take when it comes to this challenge of bringing in new fans and keeping them there?
I think we'll let 2024 decide. We're constantly evaluating new ideas, but until we roll them out, we'll keep them behind locked doors.
You're going to give me more than that. I trust you're going to give me more than that.
No, I just hope that whatever comes to fore is largely powered by a lot of second spectrum technology and Genius Sports technology, and we just want to be good partners to enable this innovation and keep pushing innovation in this space as much as we humanly can.
Fantastic. Appreciate it. Well, I'll be tuned in. I'll be watching, so I appreciate you guys both. I'm going to turn it back over to Alex.